There's a lot of talk about small towns in California. I grew up in one myself. I grew up around them, and I know that a lot of the business actually comes from people marveling at the old buildings. One that I'm familiar with is there's a place called Columbia that's literally just old buildings, old places, and is a national landmark. Now, one other town that's quite famous for that, but still has modern shops, modern businesses, is a place called Jackson. But Jackson wasn't always just a cute little town that people would pass through on their way through California. Jackson actually used to be famous for a lot of different reasons. It was really the epitome of the West for a time. It had settlers, it had gold miners, it had prostitutes, it had the governor coming down to gamble and get some. It had outlaws that were millions of dollars for a reward. And now it's a cute little town with a cute little hotel. But people also talk about the graveyard. The graveyard still has graves from those Wild West days. So, who might be buried in the Jackson graveyard? What's their long and lengthy history? And who do we have to thank for things like what it's named and the long stories of ghosts of prostitutes in the hotel? Really, what was the bones that's now on the meat of Jackson? Jackson was actually originally just somewhere people stopped when they were going through California. As many know, California got more popular when the gold rush happened. So Jackson was really an area where people could stop, get some water, feed their animals. So it was at the meeting of two rivers. It used to be called botellas, which is Spanish for bottles, because people would often, as today, leave their whiskey bottles or liquor bottles behind. Now, Jackson actually wasn't really that common to stay in or live in until a man named Colonel Alden Apollo Jackson stopped in and looked in the river, and he found gold nuggets. Now, pretty soon, he started having more people stay in settlements, build houses, and bring their families. So a lot of different characters would bring their families, they would bring their wives and children, they would have people even from overseas sail over because this was a very likable kind of life to have. You would go and you would find gold in the morning, or you would work at a hotel, and it was very easy to find work. Now soon, they also built a mine, which we'll come back to later, that would supply steady work. Now, something else was, there was a hotel, but the hotel actually popularized one of Jackson's very famous trades for a long time, prostitution. So, to fully understand, really, how prostitution worked in the Old West, you have to understand a quote that I've heard more than once from many historians, which is, paraphrased, prostitutes really started businesses of the Old West. So prostitution was one of the few ways that a woman could really make her fortune of the time. Unfortunately, a lot of the time women weren't left much in terms of money, they weren't given many career opportunities, and prostitution actually allowed them a lot more ability than would be expected. So when we talk about Jackson and prostitution, we have to understand that the reason it was also so popular was there was not many other jobs for women to have on their own. So prostitutes actually owned their own homes for a time in Jackson. So what they would do is they would own these very small, one room with a kitchen and a bathroom kind of setup. And this would be a girl's home, this would be a girl's place of work, and this would be where a girl could hang out, which sounds kind of vulgar, but it did allow them a little bit of leeway. And also it meant they weren't working under one madam. So this was kind of equivalent to working from home in a way that you're your own boss. Kind of what MLMs promise, multi-level marketing, but it actually was working for a time. So they would get an influx of customers, from travelers to miners to even the governor, known for coming down, gambling, and getting some. So the hotel, sooner than later, actually became a brothel as more prostitutes started linking up and creating their own brothels. So the hotel was also somewhere you could gamble, and then you would go up and do some things with prostitutes, and it became quite a popular place for people to come down and do things there. So it became popular for that reason. And that's one of the reasons, it really was an Old West town. But another reason is that a lot of the times we don't talk about real life outlaws that were not well known today. And outlaws were actually kind of famous from Jackson because it was such a place of a high crime rate, because there was so much crazy things going on at this time. Now, the only way that law was really enforced in Jackson and a lot of places when it first started was the hanging tree that was in the center of town. So you did basically anything and you were hung. It wasn't as much of a system as it is today, and the death sentence was much easier to get. So there was actually a man that was right out of Jackson that lived and worked there for many years, who we later found out got basically over $1 million in wanted and rewards for his capture. His name was Joaquin Murrieta, and Joaquin was an outlaw in Old Jackson. Now, some people, and this is similar, I believe, to Jesse the Kid, is he was known as a Robin Hood. So a lot of people would say that, these men, they killed his wife, and now he's that's all he does. He goes and he's fighting for the others. And unfortunately, that wasn't exactly the case for others who were, quite honestly, said, oh, he's a cold-blooded killer. So you can very much imagine he was just a normal outlaw of the time, shooting people when he needed to and getting what he wanted. And that was a very normal thing of those days. Now, he actually got so famous, though, from his escapades, from his murders, from whatever, that the reward at the time was $5,000, their money, put up by the governor, John Bigler. And it's said, and I don't believe this is true, but this was a tale that was told about him, was that he saw the poster when it was put up. He pulled it down. He looked at it for a long time, and he said, anyone who comes to me will get $1,000 automatically, and signed his name at the bottom of the poster. And I do not believe this for a second, because it's so outlandish, though it could be true. But also, if there was a signature, a lot of historians have suggested if he didn't put it there, then it's very likely that someone might have just done it to try and scare people. Maybe even one of his lackeys, if he did want to make a message. So the story continued, and he was known for running, and he was evading all the people that were trying to get him, until along came Harry Love. Harry Love was a deputy sheriff. It's really a West movie kind of thing. He was a deputy sheriff who was just ready to go, and he had an entire posse. And he did manage to chase Murrieta, and one night when Murrieta, his group, was getting their food, they were sleeping, he killed most of their gang and beheaded Murrieta and took his Murrieta's friend's hand. And it was actually quite famous. He brought it back, and the head and the hand of Murrieta's henchman was said to be on display and only lost during the San Francisco earthquake. First one. Confusing timelines, I know. And this actually didn't really deter crime rate in Jackson. That didn't happen for a very long time. The gambling just kept happening. There wasn't much of a decrease in any issues. But something that did happen is their main source of really income wasn't outlaws, it wasn't gambling, and for a little while it wasn't even prostitutes, it was actually mines. There were 2 mines built at the time in Jackson. So there was the Argonaut and there was Kennedy, similar to the president, the governor, whatever's names. So Argonaut and Kennedy were more or less competing. They had a lot of miners from town, and it really continued until the 1920s. They would go and get coal, they would go and get gold, whatever they could find, they were getting. Now, unfortunately, mining is not a safe practice. We've known this for years. We used to bring down canaries, of all things, to find out if you could keep breathing down there. We've heard of many mines falling, crashing, and this is one of the main sources for the ghost story, is a disaster that happened in Argonaut. On August 28th, 1922, in Argonaut mine, there was a fire. And as you know, a lot of what holds up a mine is wood and posts. And there were 48 men that were trapped when one of those posts fell. And they tried, and they tried, and they tried to get down to them, but there was no sign that they could even reach them. There were 48 men trapped, and when they did get to them, they were laying in rows. Something you should know about the victims were they were usually fathers and sons, sometimes immigrants, sometimes second-generation immigrants from all over. And they lay themselves down as they knew they were dying in rows so that people could know who they were with. It was an upsetting thing, and it really put Jackson as a place that people knew about for a time. 47 bodies were found at first, and a year later they actually found one more body. I couldn't find the details around that, if he tried to run, if he went deeper in the mine. But I do know that every single one of them died. There was not a single survivor. Now, if you visit Jackson, you'll see really something famous, as I talked about with the prostitution, is the hotel. It's looking like it walked right out of the age of all these other events. It's tall, it has pictures from their past inside, including a brothel, and it really does stand as a symbol for the little town. Now, it was actually not even originally called the Jackson Hotel or the Jackson National Hotel. It was originally the Louisiana Hotel in 1852, and I have no idea why, because it's very clearly in California, but it was also created before California was a thing. So, as I said, it was also a brothel or bordella for a time, and gambling was common. Now, the hotel really got a bunch of excitement from different stars for a long time. Now, some celebrities that you might know who visited were Mark Twain of his time, but also none other than John Wayne. And you can't help but wonder if maybe sometimes he did a little research on the area. Now, it really was popular for the illegal going-ons that a lot of people, including governors for a time, kind of just turned the other cheek to. But at one point, the father of Jerry Brown, Governor Brown I, came down on crime in California, and he really shut down prostitution in the area. And that was a very large income for the hotel. So for a time, it was kind of just dormant. The rest of Jackson slept. It was a teeny tiny town that people had grown up in. You know, the prostitutes either started their own businesses with their money, or sometimes they got in family, and it was kind of just quiet. And it was kind of dying. And then a family revamped the hotel. Now, in terms of ghosts, a lot of people claim sometimes they'll see celebrities. A lot of people claim they see prostitutes. The most interesting being a woman named Madame Pantalon, or Jean-Marie Sozy, who was known for being the only madame to wear pants. These stories are really remnant, in a good way, I think, of what Jackson was about for a time, which was really Wild West ideals. It had a lot of the same thing we see in those West movies that John Wayne himself was in. There was outlaws, there was cowboys, there were all these people that were running around just kind of unsure of themselves without any law. And Jackson, while it has law and it has more stability today, it does have that fun feel. It has an old candy shop. It has the hotel, and yet still has modern conveniences, which we like. It has good restaurants. It has cafes. I'm not just trying to be a commercial for Jackson here. But something cool about Jackson is we hear about ghost stories. And I really think we hear about ghost stories there because of when it started garnering national attention, which is interesting. But people don't talk about Jackson other than the ghost stories or what they think happened there. They don't talk about the nice people. They don't talk about the locals. And they don't talk about how it really is an old West town that managed to survive and have good coffee shops. Giggles from the Graveyard is written, produced, directed, recorded, all of that by me, Sabrina Jensen. All the links that might be interesting are in the description. I highly suggest visiting Jackson. It's absolutely beautiful. If you would like to hear more, only the episodes on this channel are available. All music is royalty free, but I will often be linking it in the description. Thank you for listening. Thank you for commenting if you do. And I am going to thank you more than anything and hope you have a nice day.